Good morning, Alex.
Good morning.
How are you doing today? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you very well. I'm good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. It's been a busy couple days for us over here at MadCon, but it's gone very well. We're very excited to have all the engagement that we have. And I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think the event's going very well.
Yeah. I did Ask the Expert session yesterday, and I was surprised how many people are joining. I know that obviously you can't do in-person conferences these days, and virtual stuff is definitely a challenge. But I've seen a lot of participation and engagement in this conference specifically.
Yes, we kind of left. We really were hoping that the Ask the Experts would happen in person and really people with that intimate opportunity get questions answered that they may feel comfortable asking in more of an expo setting. But we really kind of lucked out because this is one event that we can really do virtually and you still have that more experience. So we're
Yeah,
very excited.
yeah, and I've seen from yesterday's session specifically, I saw a lot of people join from all over the U.S. I think there was even someone internationally that might have not been able to join the
Yeah,
in-person session. So that's been really cool to see.
exactly. Awesome. So let's jump in here. I know you did one of these yesterday, but for people who may have not watched that session, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why we can consider you an expert in SEO?
Sure. So I've been involved in the digital space for a very long time. I started my first digital business in 1997. It was actually one of the first web hosting companies that existed. So for those that have been in the digital space for that long, it was the time of GeoCities, Hypermart, companies like that. And the idea was to be able to allow anyone to create a space on the internet that is accessible all over the world. Today it sounds like a very common idea, but back in the mid '90s, it wasn't as common. In the more recent years, I spent 3 years working at Publicis, managing digital first for Samsung and then for Walmart. And then I started my own business, Smart Sites, to bring some of that enterprise grade marketing, digital marketing to the SMB space and medium sized business space. Smart Sites has been around almost for a decade now. We're at 150, over 150 full-time employees, 6 offices worldwide. We're ranked everywhere as one of the fastest growing and top-rated digital agencies around.
That's fantastic. So, our first question here is what makes SEO today different from 1 year ago? How can we as marketers capitalize on these changes?
Good question. I don't think there's been huge changes on a 1 year basis, right? Maybe there's changes in search behavior. So there's obviously changes in content that you should be creating. I think COVID in general has created a lot of changes in search behavior. Actually, another presentation I did. Let me pull up a slide. There was a good slide from Google that talked about some of the changes in search behavior. So if you give me 1 second.
Yeah, that'd be great to share. Thank you.
No problem. Let me pull it up. Search behavior. It was. Sorry for the delay. Cool. I found it. So, kind of new things. Can I share my screen? I think I could do that, right?
Yes, you should be able to, but let me double check.
I just did it. Let me know if you see my
Yep,
screen.
there we go.
So in terms of
Perfect.
content, the big changes obviously are all COVID related, right? You just have to think about the different type of search queries that are happening now. So this is a Google slide. People searching for DIY ideas at 1 a.m. So you could see a spike. This is literally just at 1 a.m. Someone searching any query with do it yourself. You could see the not only continuous increase, almost double the search volume, but you could see the spikes around when uh, literally when this is happening. Then you have like weird FOMO situations, right? Everyone remembers the March, April toilet paper fiascos, right? Everyone was searching for toilet paper. Everyone was out of toilet paper. I think content-wise, there's just you have to be cognizant of that. People's search behavior is changing a little bit. A lot of people are sitting at home in terms of any kind of do-it-yourself projects and construction. That was obviously very big in the spring and summertime. What other good data do I have in here? So this is by industry, things that have jumped hugely with COVID. The searches for fitness, food, grocers, obviously top of people's mind. Exercising at home is top of people's mind. So this is an interesting one, and I know I'm going really quick through it. It's just a lot of data, and I don't want to make this the whole 45 minutes. But look at people searching for party games on Saturday. So this purple line is people searching for party games, like literally games to do at home with your family. And look at the spikes happening on Saturday through COVID. Let me close this out. And how do I unshare my screen? So I think content-wise, you really have to hone into what people are searching, how people are searching. Aside from that, what can I say changed? Voice searches are becoming more popular. I think that could be a presentation in itself. Optimizing for voice, Alexa, Google searches is different than regular Google search has been. Aside from that, if we don't just focus in on the last year, but look at maybe over the last 3-4 years, I think the general trend and change in SEO has been very positive. I think for those that have been in the industry for maybe 5-10 plus years, you guys remember how popular Black Hat SEO was. There was a lot of tricks to kind of cheat Google. And although people have, Google was penalizing for people for doing that for a long time, they really tightened up the way the algorithm works in the last couple of years, and Black Hat is a lot less prominent. And really following Google's best practices is a lot more preferred, which is a good thing for everyone. So if you think about it, it's good for marketers. You really should focus on unique, readable content that people coming to your website will want to read about. And it's good for the consumers that are actually you're providing them valuable content. Whereas in 5, 6, 7 years ago or 10 years ago, the big thing, right, for those that have been in the industry that long, big thing was to put a lot of dummy text in the footer of your website, make it the same font as the background so users don't see it, but you trick Google into thinking you have all that content, right? So I think generally speaking, over the last couple of years, the trend has been very positive towards the user experience and towards those that really follow guidelines and work diligently on building content, building links, as opposed to trying to find the next Black Hat trick to fool Google.
It's so funny you mentioned the dummy text. Somebody was just talking to me the other day about doing that, and they just thought they were genius. It's like, I think we've come a little ways from this, but congratulations.
It's funny. I still run into sites once in a while. Like I'm searching for something weird. Obviously, all the popular keywords, all the sites are now optimized and whatnot. But some like weird search I do, and I wind up on a website that on the bottom I see them like stuff, maybe like every single like city in the state.
Yep.
Text and weird things like that I run into from time to time.
Oh, that's great. Okay, let's see. Our next question. I know that you advocate for goal setting as one of the most important steps in developing an SEO strategy. What best practices do you have for brands or the agencies that are tracking their goals? And I know you already kind of touched on the content element, which is very big.
Yeah, so goal tracking is super important. I see, and someone mentioned it's not loud enough, so I'm gonna talk more into the mic. So I apologize in advance if I'm looking down towards the mic. I think it'll pick up a little bit better. I think goal tracking is super important and something that not everyone is doing that they should be doing, right? For a very long time, goal tracking wasn't even needed. People would do SEO and really focus on average position. So a success to your customer would be that when they Google their own name or their own keywords, they'll come up first on Google. That was the metric, right? So when you're measuring something like that, you really don't need goals or really any kind of anything outside of really Google. But over the last couple of years, Google has become so personalized that along with that never being a good strategy to just ballpark where you see yourself rank, Google has become so personalized that if you search the same thing on your computer, on your cell phone, and then you have your friend that's down the block search it as well, everyone's going to get completely different rankings. So that obviously is not a good measure to such an extent that even on Google Ads, Google got away with there's no longer average position. So without average position, what should you be doing and using a success metric? Really measuring overall holistic organic traffic in Google Analytics is the way to go, versus seeing where you show up for each individual keyword for an individual person. You really should be focusing on the traffic that organic search brings to your website. And that seems like it's logical and makes sense, but surprisingly, a lot of people haven't for a long time, and a lot of people still don't. I think aside from that, there's a trove of data in Google Analytics that you could really set up good goals and strategy for. And I think that's what it should be. Before starting any marketing strategy, you really should try to visualize where you want to be. Let's say I want to increase my organic search traffic 30% year over year, or I want to decrease the bounce rate of my organic traffic, right? Or I want to increase how much sales I get from my organic traffic. And all of those have different action points based on what your actual goal is. The one thing, and I've been saying this for a very, very, very long time, the one thing I would say is really make use of the data and the capabilities of Google Analytics. Again, I don't want to date myself here, but for people who have been around the digital space long enough, might remember that 10 years ago, it was very difficult and cumbersome to measure website traffic. You had your server logs that you would use Allstats or some kind of other software to try to give you some data, and it was very cumbersome and difficult to use, and you couldn't really set up goals or anything like that. There was a couple enterprise products that existed, Urchin being one of them at the time. They were very price prohibitive, and although we've been using it for a long time, it was very expensive. Most people didn't. For those people that don't know, it was another one of those products that Google just purchased, made better, and then made free. So really make use of the data you have in your Google Analytics, and really think about the goals and what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to just increase organic search traffic to your website? Or are you okay with the amount of organic search traffic you're having, and you just want to decrease the bounce rate and really engage the people who do make it to your website? Because those things are different, right? And the strategy you would put in place to improve your SEO would be different based on what your actual goal is. And I really encourage everyone, especially as we're wrapping up 2020 and about to start 2021, to really think about what you want to accomplish SEO wise or digitally wise in general for 2021.
Thank you for that answer. Our next question, and I can tell that you're already high on Google Analytics, but what KPIs are we looking for, and what tools do you like to measure them? Is there anything that you supplement to Google Analytics?
Yeah, so good question. So these days, almost everything could be fed into Google Analytics. So I really like Google Analytics as a general source of data. But let's talk about KPIs. So KPIs will vary not only industry to industry, but really client to client. I'll try to be general and cover kind of all the metrics, just so everyone who's listening can take something away from it. But let's talk about a local plumber, right? You have a website for a plumber. The guy does plumbing. He gets traffic for people searching for plumbing services. What would be a good KPI for him for SEO and digital in general, right? So for SEO, increase on organic search traffic would be good, right? And if that's the KPI, if you're just looking for the increase in traffic, you would work on creating unique content. You would work on getting relevant, authoritative websites to link back to the client. You would work on any technical issues on the website. But aside from that, if you really think about the SMB space and even medium-sized businesses, if I call up our plumber client, right, and say, what's important to you? What is your goal that you want to accomplish next month, next quarter, next year? I really doubt he's going to say, I want to increase my organic search traffic 22%, right? For most clients, especially in the SMB space, what's important for them is leads, clients, sales if you're e-commerce. So it's always important to really understand what's important to your client. For your client, what's important for a plumber is to get more phone calls, more leads, right? Uh, does he really care if you do it by improving the amount of organic search traffic or decreasing the bounce rate? Probably not, right? So I think KPIs are going to be very industry specific, very client specific. Outside of Google Analytics. So Google Analytics has a trove of data, and that in itself, I've spent 2-hour sessions talking about what's possible in Google Analytics. Aside from that, what's important for the small business service guys, phone calls are super important, right? I find that even in 2020, heading into 2021, I would say half of the clients that come to us don't measure their phone calls at all. And that's huge, right? So as a plumber, you got 300 phone calls last month. Where did they come from? How many came from SEO, pay-per-click, radio ads, direct traffic to your website, referrals? And not only that, how many of the phone calls became qualified leads, and where did those come from? What is your cost per qualified lead? So aside from Google Analytics, it's important to measure the phone calls become important. For e-commerce, obviously sales is a big one. If you have sales data, it's huge. Surprisingly, a quarter of e-commerce clients that come to us don't measure e-commerce data, which without it, you can't optimize anything on. Store visits really big. So there's better and better ways to measure store visits. So for example, in Google Ads, Google Ads has been doing a really, really good job measuring it. For those that are involved in that space, the SEM space, there used to be beacons that Google used to use to measure store visits and things like that. It's become a lot more integrated. So Google literally knows if you visit a store based on the applications on your cell phone. So if you use an Android phone, 99% of the time, Google will know if you visit a specific store. If you use an iPhone, any Google apps like Google Maps, Gmail will automatically feed that data as well, unless you have some settings disabled. So you could actually measure store traffic. You could measure for SEM at the very least, and with other tools for SEO. If you're a store that relies on store traffic, let's say you're a car dealership, you could measure what different channels are bringing people into your store. So sorry for a very convoluted answer, but I think it's very different per industry, per client. But generally speaking, you want to bring it as far down the funnel as possible and focus on what's important to the client. For a car dealership, is it important that someone just clicked on their website, or is it important that they got someone into a dealership that purchased a car?
Thank you. Elizabeth submitted a very good question, and I think it's kind of some important low-hanging fruit that we can take care of right now. She said, what do you recommend for somebody who is just starting out with SEO on their website? Are there any tools or tutorials that teach the basics for best keywords, creating keyword spreadsheets, mixed headers, etc.?
Good question. There's a lot of websites that try to explain and sell SEO. Can I directly recommend any? Probably not. But in my 3 to 4 minute response, I'll walk you through the basics that might get you started in the right direction, or might get anyone who's looking to start SEO, or at the very least, if they're trying to do it themselves for now, in the right direction. So I will talk quick, but I think I'll go through the basics that I think will get you started more so than reading a lot of the articles. That's funny. So the articles about SEO online are SEO optimized to bring better on Google, to bring traffic to them, and whatever way they monetize it, more so than give people information, as funny as that sounds. So here we go. SEO, basics of SEO. So you have 3 pillars. I'll make it very simple for you. 3 pillars. So number 1 is your on-site SEO. So anything technical with your website. So if your website doesn't have a title, for example, if you don't have alts for your images, like really things that Google looks for, if they don't find it, you get dinged for it, right? If Google doesn't know what your image is about, they won't think your content's about that, and they won't rank you for that. So number 1 is the technical. That's probably the most harder things for someone starting out to really understand, get a grasp for. But if you're using WordPress, for example, there's a lot of really good plugins that really walk you through the process and make it very simple. Yoast is a very popular one. So you could really just follow their prompts without necessarily needing to learn all the technical stuff. So that was pillar number one. That was on-site SEO. Number two is content. So the way I explain the importance of content is content gives you the opportunity to show up on Google. So how can I explain it? Let's say you're an Audi car dealership, and you don't have anything on your website. You don't have any pages for Audi Q5, right? If someone searches on Google for an Audi Q5, no matter how authoritative your website is, you just don't have any pages that will show up in Google search for it. So when you create content, you create an opportunity to show up in Google. So when you're creating content, you really want to think about what are my customers searching, and then create unique content around that. And every piece of content you create is an opportunity to show up in Google for that piece of information. And again, if you literally don't have a page for an Audi Q5, you have nothing. They'll come up when someone searches Audi Q5. Or similarly, if someone's comparing an Audi Q5 to a BMW, if you have a comparison page comparing those two cars, you have the opportunity to show up when someone Googles comparing those two cars. So that was pillar number two. Pillar number three is link building. So you want to get relevant, authoritative websites to link to you. A lot of it is usually link building outreach. So a good way to start with that is you could see what websites link to your competitors, and then reach out to those websites and get them to link to you. Google greatly discourages paid links, so you don't want to be paying for those links, but you would want to reach out and see if those websites could link to you. So for example, we have a client who does a car limo service. I think they do transportation from the airport. And they saw that one of their competitors was linked on the JFK website, which is the local airport here in New York City. And on their behalf, we reached out, we called, we emailed, we actually sent physical mail, and ultimately we got the JFK website to link to our client, listing them as I don't think recommended, but listing them as a limo service. So that's the kind of link building that you should be doing. So again, the three pillars would be technical on-page SEO. Number two is creating unique content, thinking about what people would search for, what your customers are searching for. Number three, really going and getting other relevant, authoritative websites to link to you. And the good place to start with that is seeing who links to your competitor. And for all the people that are commenting about, sounds like I want a new car, I'm actually a huge auto enthusiast, and I don't know if it's a chicken or egg thing, but somehow we work with a lot of automotive brands and dealerships through that. And I think mostly because I think it started with me being a car enthusiast, and because of that, we work with a lot of automotive brands. So that's why a lot of my examples are automotive.
That's fabulous. A question, you kind of touched on this earlier, how voice is changing the way that SEO operates. So should we be building our sites or featured snippets differently to optimize for voice?
Good question. So give me 1 second. I'm going to respond to a comment here so people can reach out to me. 1 second. I've spoken about voice stuff for a little bit, and I think I might have even had MadCon at one point, so I'll try not to be too repetitive. But for people that have been involved in the digital space for more than 6 years, might remember how every year was the year of mobile. I think it was like that when I was still at Publicis 10 years ago. Literally every year, this is going to be the year of mobile, right? I remember this year, the number of apps people have on their cell phone went up from 3 on average to 6 on average. This is the year of mobile. And it was mobile. And then people, I think, got numb to it a little bit. Literally, I think every single magazine, especially around now, they try to predict what's coming for next year. I remember the headlines. It was like 2010, the year of mobile. I think people got numb to it and somehow it snuck up on us. And now I would say for our clients, 70% of their traffic comes from mobile, right? And if you're designing a website for a desktop these days and not for mobile, you're not going to succeed. It went from people needing to be cognizant of mobile and thinking about mobile and designing for mobile to now what everyone calls mobile first, right? You have to think of mobile first. You have to design for mobile more than desktop. Why did I go off on that tangent? I think voice is very similar. I think it's a little too early to declare 2020, 21, 22 to be the year of voice search, right? But I think it will slowly creep up on us, and one day we'll wake up and 50% of your website traffic is going to be coming from voice search. I don't think it's going to happen next year. I don't think it's going to happen the year after, but it's important to think about it and be ready for it. So what does it mean to create content for voice search? So you really want to think about the way people verbalize a search query over voice versus typing it in, right? Where on Google, people, and I apologize in advance, but it's going to be old car examples again. where people on Google, if you're looking for a car dealership, you would go and type in Audi dealership, right? Voice search, you're not going to say, hey, Alexa, Audi dealership. You're going to say, hey, Alexa, what is the nearest Audi dealership to Franklin Lakes, New Jersey? So you just have to be cognizant that people are going to be searching more in sentence format. Also for the voice services, Alexa, Google, all of them, to provide good information back to someone who searches. There's some snippet and some format you have to do on your website, and your content really needs to be answering a question. So what does that mean? If you have general information on your website about a question, Google and Alexa is not going to pick that up as an answer. You really need to create a piece of content, preferably an entire page that answers a question. And some people already started doing that, kind of putting Q&A sections on their website. There's different ways to do it, but I think the play right now, looking into 2021, is voice search going to drive 20% of the traffic to your website? It's not. It'll probably be somewhere in 1 to 5%. But if you want to get ready for it, you just have to start generating content that's really question-based. Like the page title of your content is a question. You answer that question concisely in 2 sentences below that question. And then under that, you could have your longer answer for someone who comes across it on a desktop or mobile. And then just following Google's guidelines on snippets and metas for it and everything like that. And I think that's the way to go. If you do it correctly, that page will not only grab traffic for people asking the whole long question, but also grab traffic from Google search in general, where generally speaking, for the direction the last couple of years is for people to search in longer tail queries. So I think generally it'll help you in every regard, and it will get you ready for mobile search.
Thank you, Alex. You've mentioned snippets quite a bit. So can you talk to us about the importance of featured snippets?
Yeah, so good question. So featured snippets, and I'm sure it's not going to be the end of it. So the snippets and the content Google shows will keep changing over time. It's not something that stays static. So I don't want to say something that in 6 months is going to be completely invalid. But for the time being, featured snippets is really how Google is grabbing authoritative information. They're displaying it on the right side of search when you search, and a lot of it is actually what's coming back in voice searches. So there's a lot of best practices and things you could follow to have your content show up in the featured snippets from Google. But again, it's such a moving ball, and I think regardless of how much you try to get your content to show up there, because it's really cool, right? It's your content and your site looks really authoritative if it comes up in the Google's like response when someone searches something. But I think aside from following all the best practices for it, the first step is always going to be to make your site generally more authoritative. Google's not going to grab a featured snippet from a random blog someone started 3 days ago, no matter how good your information. So I think the general strategy is still the same, where you focus on having authoritative, relevant websites linked to you to show Google that you're yourself are authoritative. Create a lot of unique content, and then really once you're at that point, you could try to optimize your content to come up more so in the featured snippets.
All right, we're going to dig into budget planning a little bit here. So what financial investments do you recommend brands make into their SEO strategy? Or are there more organic tactics more important?
Yeah, good question. So it's probably, I think that the more successful clients we have do a little bit of both, but it's a little bit internally, a little bit externally. But let's take it from the top. So budget planning. So I think budget planning, generally speaking, starts with a general marketing budget. Then you could subdivide it into digital versus traditional. When you're looking at digital, I guess the main pillars would be SEO, SEM, social, and SEO. Really, I mean, there could be some other things, but email marketing, a couple other things. But really, those are the three big pillars. Once you have it down to an SEO budget, how do you decide what that budget should be of the overall spend and really where you should be investing that? I think that becomes an exercise in what are your competencies as a company, as a department, as an individual, and what things should you have an external vendor help with. Again, I will divert back to my three pillars of SEO being on page, content creation, and link building, link outreach. If you have someone on staff that's already doing, for example, you have a social media manager that's doing social media posts for you. They're posting every day on Facebook, Instagram, pictures and content. Could that person be asked to create actual content as well? I don't see why not. And you could definitely have that person. It's similar skill set, I would say. Have create some of the posts that are going out, create international content and maybe blog posts. Do you have someone on your team that's doing outbound sales that part of their responsibilities could be outbound link building? They could reach out to websites, call up website owners and ask them to link to you. Maybe. So you really should think about what are your competencies? What do you have the manpower to do? Do you have the manpower to do the on-page development stuff? Do you have like a developer that's really good at that? Do you have someone that writes content anyway, that can write up the content? Or if you don't have all three, you really just get someone to help with all three. I can't say it's standard in the industry, but for us as an agency, the way we sell SEO is ours. So unfortunately, SEO has a lot of negative connotation. As an industry, it's a lot of mystery box stuff. Like, unfortunately, it's just the way it's been for I want to say decades. It sounds like a long time, but it really has been decades. SEO has always been sold kind of like a mystery box, like pay me this arbitrary amount and I'll make you show up more on Google. The way it's been moving towards and the way we've been selling it since day one is literally hours. So we sell a minimum of 50 hours per month at $50 an hour, and then you kind of either we on your behalf decide or you give us feedback on how you want those hours allocated. Do you want us to spend the 50 hours creating content for you? Or do you want to split that up and have us do content, have us do link building, and have us do on-page SEO as well? I think ultimately that's the best way to think of it. Really, SEO is how much hours you invest in doing it. It's all putting the work in. Is it like mysterious work with secret formulas like some companies try to make it out to be? No. I think it's literally if you put in the hours of fixing up your website, of creating content, and doing link building outreach, that's all that SEO is. And there's a lot of third-party tools that could help gauge that budgeting-wise. Again, coming back to the original question of budgeting, there's a lot of third-party tools that will show you, again, the three things: how optimized your site is, how much content your site has, and how much links back to your site there are. A lot of them are free. If you actually, for those that don't know, if you go to Google and you type site and then you do a colon and then you do your domain, Google will show you how many index pages you have in Google. So off the bat, you know how much unique content you have that Google values enough to index. The next exercise is you go and you Google a keyword that you want to rank for. you pull up your top competitor and do the same exercise. So let's say you have 1,000 pages, your competitor has 10,000 pages. Well, that's a gap you have to bridge to start ranking as well as they do. And then you do the same exercise with links. So you could use SEMrush. There's a lot of tools that'll give you both your domain authority and how many domains link to you. So 20 domains linked to you, 100 domains linked to the competitor that ranks very well. Fairly easy to see where you need to be. So I think once you determine that, you work your way back and say, well, how many hours or how many dollars is it going to take for me to create 1,000 pieces of unique content or get 30 more websites to link to me? I think that's exercise, and surprisingly, following that logic, it's a lot more logical and easier to do than a lot of people make it out to be.
Okay, so in our last couple minutes here, we have a very good question. What emerging SEO trends are you currently watching that you expect will affect us all in the next 5 years or so?
I think it's the same trend that we've been seeing for a little while, where user experience has become a lot more important. It's no longer, like we talked about earlier, it's no longer about stuffing your footer with random anchor texts and random text to fool Google into thinking your site is about that content. It's really about the user experience. There's already a lot of indication that Google is using user experience as a ranking factor. I think it'll become more and more so a ranking factor. So what does user experience mean, right? Your website needs to be fast. That was always the case, right? If your website takes 10 seconds to load, you lose 50% of your visitors. That's always been the case, but now it's actually going to be a ranking factor, and you'll rank better by having a faster website. I think there's going to be a lot of other factors that go into it. Google surprisingly has a lot of information, especially through Google Analytics. They know the bounce rate on your website. They know how engaged users are with your content. They know how long users spend on your content. And I think more and more so, they're going to use those factors to show websites and pieces of content that create a better user experience. And I think overall, it's going to be a better experience for everyone, right? In Google search, if you search for a piece of information, the information you're given should be something that previous people who have searched it have actually spent time engaging with and have found it useful. In the past, it was very hard for Google to focus on that. So instead, they used proxies to get to those kind of metrics. But I think more and more so, they actually have that information. Even without Google Analytics, they know how optimized your website is for mobile, for example. They know how fast your website is. They have all these metrics that they're already feeding into their algorithm. And I think it's going to become more and more important. Not to say that link building and content are going to go away. Both are still super, super important. And I always say how important content is because, again, it's your opportunity to come up in search. If you don't have a piece of content about the search query, you're not going to come up. But looking forward, not even 5 years, but 1 to 3 years, user experience is going to be huge. And I think it's going to be more and more important for marketers, not just SEO strategists, but marketers in general, to really dial in and focus in on the user experience on their website. Where are my users dropping off? Why did my bounce rate increase? Why did my time on site get worse? Things like that have always been important, are going to become even more important now because they'll affect your SEO traffic.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I know you responded to somebody saying if they wanted to reach out, ping you on LinkedIn. Is that the best way to reach you if people have more questions?
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. So if you go to alexmelen.com, ALEXMELEN.com, in the footer, I have all of my social media stuff linked. So feel free to reach out to me on any platform. Find LinkedIn is usually best, but I'm on every single platform, and I'm open for questions or anything I could help with at any time.
Fantastic. I can't thank you enough for joining us for today for your second expert session. We've been thrilled to work with you, and hopefully next year we can have an in-person event with MadCon, and we'll get to experience even more of this great, educational chat. So thank you again, Alex.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Have a good day.